Okay, great. The first thing that happens is a server sends the browser an HTML document. This is just a text document made up of HTML tags. The browser, it then converts those tags it sees to visual components on the screen. For example, if it sees a button HTML tag, it will draw a button on the screen correspondingly. I mean, that makes sense, right? All of the tags together, though, form a tree that the browser sort of internally in memory converts into what we call the DOM, or Document Object Model. This is just a really fancy way of saying the browser keeps track of what is on the screen in the form of a tree structure. And it has a JavaScript API available to allow programs to manipulate the content on the screen. Beyond a button tag, another tag that browsers understand is the script tag. This is a special type of tag that doesn't describe a visual element like a button, but it actually tells the browser how to load and run code written in the JavaScript programming language. So to use a React program, you first include a script tag that contains all of the source code for the React library. This just means it defines all the functions you need and sets up the browser environment to be able to run React programs. Okay, Thomas. So let me double check with you. So first, the browser, it gets this HTML document. Then somehow it reads that document, I guess, and sees the script thing. And the script thing includes the actual JavaScript code for React. Is that correct? Yes, exactly. Sounds simple, but I imagine it's a lot more complicated underneath. If I've learned anything about computers and programming at this point, it's that everything is more complicated underneath. Well, anyways, I'm curious what happens next. How do you actually include and run your React program? You're absolutely right. There are many layers of complication below that, but that is just the basics and really all we need to know in terms of mechanics before we start getting into like how React actually works. Next, after this, to actually include your own React program, you just need to have another script tag that includes the JavaScript that defines your program. Or you could even add your code after the React library code in the first script tag. Doesn't really matter. And anyways, after that, your code then needs to call the create root function. The React library code that was loaded and run by the browser from the first script tag is what actually defined the create root function. It's not really magic. It's just JavaScript code. It defined a function called create root. And if you call the create root function passing in a reference to a DOM element, then React will get set up to use that DOM element as the container for the output of your entire React program. So all of the output your React program creates will show up on the screen and in the DOM inside this container element that you pass to create root. Okay, that kind of makes sense to me, but what the heck is a DOM element and how do you pass in a reference to one? Seems like you're speaking a foreign language here. I mean, come on, fill me in here, Thomas. All right, great question. I don't want to be speaking a foreign language to you here. So a DOM element, DOM standing for Document Object Model, just means one of the HTML tags that you included in the HTML document that the server sent to the browser. So if you include a div tag in the HTML, you can write some basic JavaScript code to tell the browser to give you a reference to that div tag. A reference is just something that you can assign to a variable and then use with the browser's JavaScript APIs to interact with those elements that are on the screen. Oh, so that must be what I'm trying to remember. Yeah, the document.getElementById. I used to call that all the time when I was working on my basic HTML pages. That was so yeah, I used to use that when I was trying to create this new ticketing feature that had all these bugs. Is that kind of what you're talking about in terms of like JavaScript API functions? Yes, exactly. There are a number of functions you can call that browsers provide that will allow you to get a reference to one or more of the elements that you see on the screen. Oh, okay, sweet. So we grab a reference to this kind of container element and then pass it to React's create root. Is that correct? I mean, what happens after that? Yes, that is correct. After that, you need to call the render method on the return value from create root, passing in a React component object. Wow, Thomas, that's a lot. All right, so we call the render method. That makes sense. But can you elaborate on what you mean by a, quote, React component? Yeah, of course. We're getting there. Don't worry. So from a high level, React is actually pretty simple. You just call the render method, passing in a specific type of JavaScript object that React understands. React then converts that JavaScript object into DOM elements that you see on the screen. Similar to how when the page was initially loaded, it took the HTML tags and converted them to elements on the screen. It's basic. It kind of appears to be the same thing as just like creating a regular HTML document and having the browser load and render that.